because it is the beginning of a para, I'll quickly go through, but I'll explain the context and then we'll start reading. Sri Aurobindo is comparing the possibility of the individual and the cosmic consciousness. When we are in our normal condition of our normal condition of ignorance, we are identified with body, mind, life, and we see the multiplicity of the universe and think it to be true. That is our first level. There we are fully conscious of our individuality, but not the true individuality. We are conscious only of our, what Sri Aurobindo calls the personality. Personality with a lowercase is body, life and mind. But person with a P cap is the soul, of which normally we are not conscious. Okay? So, Sri Aurobindo is saying that when you go to the second level of the spiritual planes of consciousness, the ego disappears, but the real personality emerges, and yet you are experiencing the cosmic consciousness. Yasmin, good morning. So when you experience the cosmic consciousness, the ascetic says, I want absolutely the infinite. I don't want any limitation of the individuality. So he disappears into the individuality. Into the cosmicity. So this is, but Sri Aurobindo is saying that is only one aspect. Why not we have both? Why not we have the finite and the infinite? Why not have the individuality as well as the cosmic consciousness? Then he himself is saying that one possible reason could be that when you are in that consciousness of both, okay, the individual as well as the cosmic consciousness, you don't get the absolute cosmic consciousness. You don't get that absolute liberation. There is still some imperfection. That is the reason why the ascetic chooses to go into the absolute liberation. Okay, this is what he is discussing. So, and then Sri Aurobindo says, is that necessary? He discusses that. So, I'll read the last sentence of the previous para. Okay, and then we'll discuss that and then go on to the para that we read last time, but I'll start from the beginning. So that is possible, so he is saying. What is possible? To completely eliminate the individuality and go into the absolute impersonal consciousness. Absolute impersonality, no personality at all. That is possible, Sri Aurobindo is saying. But there is no necessity to uphold it as the ultimate aim of our being or as our ultimate perfection. If you want to do that, you are welcome to do that. But why do you have no right to say that that is the ultimate aim? That is what you like. But it's not necessary. I have another idea. I have the idea that we should have both. So that's another possibility. That's what Sri Aurobindo is saying. He is justifying the ascetic's decision to disappear into the absolute infinity. But he is saying, you have no right to say that that's the only solution. Okay, that's what Sri Aurobindo is saying. Now I will start reading each sentence from the next paragraph. Or the one possible reason would be that in the power, the act of consciousness there is not real union, and that only in the status of consciousness is there perfect, undifferentiated unity. This sentence is justifying the ascetic idea. Okay, he's saying maybe, okay, or the one possible reason, possible. Sri Aurobindo is not saying it is absolutely right. He's saying it could be that the ascetic is right in a certain way. That would be the power. That is the act of consciousness there is not real union, and that only in the status of consciousness, total static condition. Okay? No movement, no identification with the universe. If you are identified with the universe in a cosmic consciousness, you are in a static as well as the active consciousness. He says no, the ascetic prefers the other one. Total, you have to stress the word status. only in the status of consciousness, in the silence of consciousness, is there perfect undifferentiated unity. Undifferentiated. No qualified unity. Now, in what we may call the waking union of the individual with the divine, that means you are fully conscious in your or the outer world, okay, as opposed to the falling asleep or a concentration of the individual consciousness in an absorbed identity. This is the waking samadhi and the sleeping samadhi. Sleeping samadhi means your consciousness has gone absolutely out and has completely rejected body-mind life. You are not conscious of the body-mind life at all. Okay, that's the difference. Speaking of the difference. Now, in what we call the waking union of the individual with the divine, as opposed to a falling asleep or a concentration of the individual consciousness in an absorbed identity, there is certainly and must be a differentiation of experience. The two experiences are different. For in this active unity, waking samadhi, when you are fully conscious of your individuality and also you are in a cosmic consciousness. That's the second level. This can happen because when you experience a cosmic consciousness, the question arises, who is experiencing the cosmic consciousness? And the answer is the real individual, not the ego, which is limited, but the real individual who is now everywhere. Okay? There is an individuality which is universal, active unity. The individual Purusha enlarges its active experience as well as all his static consciousness into a way of union with the self of his being and of the world being. So, self of his being, individuality. World being, impersonality, okay, cosmicity. And yet, individualization remains and therefore differentiation. So, this could be one reason why the ascetic is choosing absolute dissolution of the individuality. So, again, to make it very clear, at our level, we are conscious of our ego and we have a individuality which is not the real individuality. We go to the second level, you have the real individuality and the possibility of a cosmic consciousness also is there. Note that the second level, the cosmic consciousness is not necessarily there. You are free, but you reject the physical world. Okay? When you are in a cosmic consciousness, you don't reject the physical world because you are in the cosmos. How can you reject the physical world? Okay. So, in fact, I take you back to the last sentence of the very early chapter where he says, when you enter into the self, three possibilities. One possibility, which is most likely, you reject the physical world because it is only illusion. It is only outer forms and shapes, like dreams or shadows. The other possibility is that you enter into a cosmic consciousness where you don't reject the physical world, you embrace it. Second possibility, all in the spiritual planes of consciousness. The third possibility, like what happened to Sri Aurobindo, he is seeing the physical world as unreal, and yet he does not jump to conclusions. He waits patiently. Okay, so that's what he's saying. All these things, the three things are possible. Okay? So therefore, differentiation. So when you are in the second level, there is cosmicity as well as individuality. Okay, and yet individualization remains and therefore differentiation. The Purusha is aware of all other individuals as selves of himself. That's a cosmic consciousness. He may, by a dynamic union, become aware of their mental and practical action as occurring in his universal consciousness. All their actions, all their thoughts and all their emotions, they are yours. You feel them to be yours. Just as he is aware of his own mental and practical action. He may help to determine their action by subjective union with them. This sentence is very interesting. This is how the Guru helps the sadhak. He may help to determine their action by subjective union with them. Mother of Sri Aurobindo will identify themselves with their disciples and immediately understand the problem, because now the problem is theirs and they know how to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with it, but they know how to deal with it and they cure you. Okay, they may help you in this way. But still, there is a practical difference. Practical difference between individuals. Although you feel others to be yourself, yet you see also their difference. The action of the divine in himself is that with which he is particularly and directly concerned. The action of the divine in his other selves is that with which he is universally concerned, not directly, but through and by his union with them and with the divine. This, what he's saying here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, he's saying that when you are in the divine consciousness, you can, even if you are in the cosmic consciousness, you can exclude the cosmic consciousness and concentrate only on your own actions and your own thoughts and your own emotions. Okay? But you can also extend it and include others in it. That's what he's saying. I'm reading again and we'll stress certain words. The action of the divine in himself, that means not interested in the universe, is that with which he is particularly and directly concerned. Directly concerned only with himself. The action of the divine in his other selves, when you are in a cosmic consciousness, the divine is helping the other sadhaks, is that with which he is universally concerned. Okay? That consciousness is a universal consciousness. Okay? Not directly, but through and by his union with them and with the divine. So on the one hand, he is identified with the divine. On the other hand, he is identified with the cosmos and therefore the individual. That's how the guru helps the disciples. The individual, therefore, exists, though he exceeds the little separative ego. The separative ego is level 1. The individual and cosmic is level 2. There is a level 3, which are both but fully integrated. That's what the ascetic misses. Okay. The ascetic does not go to the third level. He disappears from the second level. He disappears into the infinite. So they're saying you need not do that. You can go to the third level and have both fully. The universal exists and is embraced by him, but it does not absorb and abolish all individual differentiation. Even though by his universalizing himself, the limitation which we call the ego is overcome. Okay. So all these possibilities are there. You can, when you go to the spiritual levels of consciousness, concentrate only on yourself and reject the physical world. On the other hand, you need not reject the physical world. Okay. And you can identify yourself with the divine and the cosmos. But there is a third possibility, that you can have a relation with the divine, but you need not enter into him. So these are the three positions of the Advaita philosophy, is the Shankara, and the Vishishta Advaita, special, Bheda, Bheda, Bheda as well as Abheda. I am one with the divine, and yet I am aware also of my individuality, which is the Abheda. Okay, no, sorry, the Bheda. And Madhvacharya, he says that you are separate, but you can have a relation with the divine. But the union with the divine is not possible. That is the third level. Okay. So these three, all these possibilities, this soul can experience. That's what he said. Clear? So we need not think that the spiritual consciousness is only one. There are a huge number of combinations possible. So here he has discussed three possibilities. Okay. Now we go to the next one.
What exactly?
Pardon?
Hello?
Yes, tell me.
What exactly is the meaning of the word status?
Silence. No movement. Static. Okay. The word status also can mean a certain level. Okay. But take it in the sense of absolute silence, static, no movement at all. Take it in that sense. He uses in that sense. Is that clear? In the physical world, there is constant movement. In the self, in the higher planes of consciousness, you experience a static condition. What should we use the word? Silence. Okay. Silence not only in sound, but in action also. Complete silence. Yasmin?
Yes, yes, I understood.
Yeah, but
It
still
takes little time for me to put my microphone on and off. It takes little time to put my microphone on and off, so
I
I
see.
may not be able to respond immediately.
Acha, acha. Okay, okay, I understand. I understand. So it's very clear now. The status, that's why I stress the word status. Otherwise, if you read very carelessly and that only in the status of consciousness, then you'll miss the meaning. So you have to stress it. That only in the status of consciousness, in the silence of consciousness, is there perfect, undifferentiated unity. Okay? Absolute individuality disappears in the absolute silence. But it's possible to have both. That's what it is. Now we read the next one. Very uh, about a page, less than a page.
Shall I?
Yeah, please. Now we may get rid of.
Now we may get rid of this differentiation by plunging into the absorption of an exclusive unity. But to what end? For perfect union. But we do not forfeit that by accepting the differentiation any more than the divine forfeits his oneness by accepting it. We have the perfect union in his being and can absorb ourselves in it at any time. But we have also this other differentiated unity and can emerge into it and act freely in it at any time without losing oneness. For we have merged the ego and are absolved from the exclusive stresses of our mentality. Then for peace and rest. But we have the peace and rest by virtue of our unity with Him, even as the divine possesses for ever his eternal calm in the midst of his eternal action. Then for the mere joy of getting rid of all differentiation. But that differentiation has its divine purpose. It is a means of greater unity, not as in the egoistic life, a means of divisions. For we enjoy by it our unity with our other selves and with God in all, which we exclude by our rejection of his multiple being. In either experience, it is divine in the individual possessing and enjoying, in one case, the divine in his pure unity, or in the other, the divine in that, and in the unity of the cosmos. It is not the absolute divine recovering after having lost his unity. Certainly, we may prefer the absorption in a pure exclusive unity or a departure into supercosmic transcendence. But there is, in the spiritual truth of the divine existence, no compelling reason why we should not participate in this large possession and bliss of His universal being, which is the fulfillment of our individuality.
Okay, so he is discussing here the logic of the ascetic and whether there is an absolute reason for that. In the previous para, he has told you that if the ascetic wants to get the absolute union and dissolve himself into the absolute union, impersonality without anything to do with the physical world, he is welcome to do that. He can do that if he wants. But he should not say that that is the only solution. That's the only spiritual solution. There are other solutions also. Okay, so that's what is being discussed here. In other words, the divine need not limit himself only to one goal. Why should he limit himself to one goal? That the one goal is disappear into the infinite. Fine, that's the choice available. But the other choice is you will be identified with me and yet you will work in the physical world. To combine these two is not easy, but it becomes possible in this supramental world. It becomes possible. That's what Sri is saying. So he is taking up one by one what is the argument of the ascetic and then he is discussing it. Okay. Now, I read each sentence and will be clear what he is saying. Now, we may get rid of this differentiation by plunging into the absorption of an exclusive unity. Exclusive means getting rid of the multiplicity of the universe. And we go only into the into the universality and unity by removing the physical world and its multiplicity. But why should we do that? Same is asking. But to what end? Why should we do that? For perfect union. The ascetic is answering, yes, I want perfect union. I don't want imperfect union. I don't want the lower. But Srindra is again answering, but we do not forfeit that by accepting differentiation any more than the divine forfeits his oneness by accepting it. Why do you think that only one status is possible? The divine is himself at the highest level, seated above, calm and quiet, and yet he is there in the cosmos. So what the divine is doing, we can also essentially replicate, we can also duplicate that consciousness. That's what he's saying. After all, we are the divine. So what the divine is doing, well, he also can do. So the ascetic, if he wants to do that, well and good. But that's not the only solution. Okay? If he answers that I want only exclusive unity, so they say, okay, you can do that. But I would prefer to be in both. I want the unity as well as the others. Okay? So remember the example of Raman Maharshi, okay? I give you an interesting this question of the individuality and the universality and the impersonality and the personal is a very interesting one, okay? And so they are discussing this, what he is saying. When Raman Maharshi entered into the self, he considered going away to the top of the hill and remaining there without having anything to do with the physical world. So he started walking up, okay, that path. But he came to a path. If any of you have gone to Tiruvannamalai, you will see there is a very small path that goes up to the Skandashram. It's about 15 minutes walk. And when you go there, it's a very narrow path. And on both sides, there are thorns and bushes. So he was walking, and there is an old lady who with her legs stretched out and stopping him from coming. So he told her, please remove your legs so that I can go across. And then she answered him, why do you want to go? You go back to where you came from, go down and remain at the foot of the hill. Okay. This is what actually happened to him. He has himself told that. But the interpretation in our ashram is that it was mother who told him to go down. Don't remain only in the impersonal silence. Be in the physical world and help the others. Why do you want to go there? This also is a possibility. Okay, so that's one story. The other story is the Ramakrishna. He used to shoot off into what is the falling asleep. His body used to become absolutely unconscious of the physical world, and he used to go right up there. Okay? And his consciousness is enjoying the absolute unity. But then the Divine Mother told him, you can't do that all the time. You have to come down. So remain down and don't go on shooting up. You can have the divine consciousness, but be also in the physical world. Okay. So, and he used to do that with a very interesting device. I told you, na? He used to have a small desire. That desire is the one that will anchor you to the lower level. Just as an anchor doesn't allow the ship to move here and there and anchors it down. So now your consciousness is in the lower level. Okay. So, lower level and higher level, these are all ways of speaking, because part of you can be up there and part of you can be down here helping the others. So they're discussing. He says, yes, the ascetic can go into the absolute impersonality, but what's the point? But to what end? For perfect union. But we do not forfeit that by accepting the differentiation any more than the divine forfeits his oneness by accepting it. The divine is there at the transcendental level, but he is also there at the universal level, and he is even there in the individual level. So we have the perfect union of his being and can absorb ourselves in it at any time. We have the choice. We can go into that consciousness and remain down also. Now this is very interesting because Mother is doing that. In the agenda she says that when I am in the lower consciousness, okay, she is not identifying herself with the lower, but the consciousness come down to deal with people who are coming to see her, and she has to answer them. So naturally she has to be in the body. But she is not imprisoned in the body, but she is in the body. And she says, then the pain comes. Okay? Pain and the unwillingness to eat and all that. And then she says that when the consciousness goes up, there is no more pain at all. Okay? So this is thing that I mention all these things so that you can have an idea of what is being discussed. Okay, it's not something abstract. It's absolutely something very, very practical. Okay, so Srimati is saying, but we can also have this other differentiated unity, second level. Okay, and also at the third level, you can have the differentiated unity, absolute differentiated unity, and can emerge in it and act freely in it at any time without losing oneness. That's what Srimati is doing. He is having effect in the physical world. Okay, for we have merged the ego and are absolved from the exclusive stresses of mentality. The word absolve is very interesting. Okay? The word absolve, again, Srimati is using an image. To absolve is to declare someone free of guilt. Okay? That means you are not bound anymore by your limitations and your sins. So, for if you are in the, you get rid of your ego, you are absolved from the exclusive stresses of the mentality. The mind can remain in the multiplicity and also it can rise to the unity. You are not punished, you are set free. Okay? The judge absolves the accused and sets him free. So that's what Srimati is saying. So when you get rid of your ego, you are absolved from the limitations of the ego. You can be in both. You can be here and there. Now the other question that the ascetic is raising. No, I want absolute peace and rest. I don't want any action. I don't want to be in the physical world. I want the static condition. I want the status. I don't want the activity. I want the passivity. That's what's the meaning by then for peace and rest. And Srimati is answering again himself. But we have the peace and rest by virtue of our unity with him. Whenever I want, I can go into that consciousness. Even as the divine possesses forever his eternal calm in the midst of his eternal action. He is transcendental as well as cosmic. That he has said many times before. It is not that when the individual is experiencing the transcendental, he is not in the cosmos. Usually, in the spiritual planes of consciousness, either you are in the individual, or you are in the cosmic, or you are in the transcendental, but not altogether. Altogether is possible only at the third level, spiritual, supramental level. Then, again, another question. Then, for the mere joy of getting rid of all differentiation. So, why does the ascetic? Three questions he is. First of all, I want perfect union. Srimati says you can have that elsewhere also. Then I want peace and rest. But that also you can have elsewhere. That's what Srimati is saying. Whenever you want, you can have it. Now the third question. Then for the mere joy of getting rid of all differentiation. But that differentiation has its divine purpose. Okay? Differentiation also, there is a divine purpose. Why do you want to limit yourself? It's a means of greater unity, not as in the egoistic life, a means of divisions. Okay? When you are in the level 1, you are seeing the multiplicity. But when you go to the second level, you see the multiplicity and there is a purpose to it also. You may decide to get rid of the multiplicity, but it's not necessary. For we enjoy by it our unity with other selves and with God in all. If you are enjoying your own relation with the divine, that's fine. But when you start enjoying your relation with God, number 1, your relation with the others, number 2, and number 3, what is very interesting, what it is, you start enjoying the others' relation among themselves as well as with God. That also you can enjoy. Suppose Jasmine is enjoying her consciousness of union with the divine, I can enjoy her relation with the divine. That's what Srimati is saying elsewhere. Even that is possible. So how much richer it becomes. So why should you take the ascetic solution? Okay, so that's what. Not only that, if Yasmin is enjoying her relation with her son, okay, I can also enjoy that, her relation with her son. I can enjoy that relation. So that's what Srimati is saying. Not here, but elsewhere. Okay, so much richer it becomes. But that differentiation has divine purpose. It's a means of greater unity, not as in the egoistic life, a means of divisions. Or we enjoy by it our unity with our other selves and with God in all, that's a cosmic consciousness, which we exclude by our rejection of his multiple being. The ascetic is excluding and therefore he is limiting. He wants only one type of pleasure. But Srivastava says, why not have pleasure of different types? Not pleasure, ananda. In either experience, it is the divine in the individual possessing and enjoying in one case the divine in his pure unity, or in the other, the divine in that and in the unity of the cosmos. In either case, in the ascetic as well as the other one, okay, it is the divine who is doing that. It is not the absolute divine recovering after having lost his unity. Okay. The divine is capable of all these things together. Certainly, we may prefer the absorption in a pure exclusive unity or a departure into the supracosmic transcendence. Of course, you can do that, he said. Of course, the ascetic has a right to do that. But there is in the spiritual truth of the divine existence no compelling reason why we should not participate in the large possession and bliss of his universal being, which is the fulfillment of our individuality. The individuality you need not reject. The individuality can become the universality, and your enjoyment will be much more than simply rejecting the individuality. Okay? Very interesting way of looking at it, and that's what Srivastava is saying. The divine can have so many options. So we choose the better option, another option. Okay, we can read the next one. Shilpa read this one. So the next one, but we see further. Any one of you?
Should I read?
Yes, go ahead.
But we see further that it is not solely and ultimately the cosmic being into which our individual being enters, but something in which both are unified. As our individualization in the world is a becoming of that self, so is the world too a becoming of that self. The world being includes always the individual being. Therefore, these two becomings, the cosmic and the individual, are always related to each other and, in their practical relation, mutually dependent. But we find that the individual being also comes, in the end, to include the world in its consciousness. And since this is not by an evolution of the spiritual individual, but by his coming to his full, large, and perfect self-consciousness, we must suppose that the individual always included the cosmos, and it is only the surface consciousness which by ignorance failed to possess that inclusion because of its self-limitation in ego. But when we speak of the mutual inclusion of the cosmic and the individual and the world in me, I in the world, all in me, I in all. For that is the liberated self-experience. We are evidently traveling beyond the language of the normal reason. That is because the words we have to use were minted by mind and given their values by an intellect bound to the conceptions of physical space and circumstance, and using for the language of a higher psychological figures drawn from the physical life and the experience of the senses. But the plane of consciousness to which the liberated human being arises is not dependent upon the physical world, and the cosmos which we thus include and are included in is not the physical cosmos, but the harmonically manifest being of God in certain great rhythms of his consciousness, of his conscious force and self-delight. Therefore, this mutual inclusion is spiritual and psychological. It is a translation of the two forms of the many, all and individual, into a unifying spiritual experience. a translation of the eternal unity of the one and the many. For the one is the eternal unity of the many, differentiating and in the cosmos. This means that cosmos and individual are manifestations of a transcendent self who is indivisible being, although he seems to be divided or distributed. But he is not really divided or distributed, but indivisibly present everywhere. Therefore, all is in each, and each is in all, and all is in God, and God in all. And when the liberated soul comes into union with this transcendent, it has this self-expression of itself and cosmos, which is translated psychologically into a mutual inclusion and a persistent existence of both in a divine union, which is at once a oneness and a fusion and an embrace.
Big para, and we have about 10 minutes. So we can start. Okay. But we see, so Sridhar is saying the ascetic is within his rights to go only into the static condition. But I prefer to have the static as well as the dynamic. Okay. I want to be in the action of the physical world, and at the higher level of my consciousness, whenever I want, I can withdraw myself and be there. And when I withdraw myself, I need not lose my consciousness of the physical world. I can be in both. It can be a waking samadhi. Okay, so this is what he's saying in the Bible and discussing in detail. So, but we see farther. Okay, always when they use the word farther, he doesn't use the word further. The meaning is the same, but he always prefers the farther. But we see farther that it is not solely and ultimately the cosmic being into which our individual being enters, but something in which both are unified. In other words, there are only two levels. There is a level of the many, the multiplicity, which is our ignorance, and there is the level of the spiritual planes of consciousness, which is you can have the cosmic consciousness. These are not the only two. There is a third one. That's what is now bringing in the transcendent. But we see further that it is not solely and ultimately the cosmic being into which the individual being enters, but something in which both are unified. Okay? Both can be there. As our individualization in the world is a becoming of that self. Okay? You remember this? What is meaning by this? As our individualization in the world is a becoming of that self. Okay? I'll just dwell a little on this because then you have to understand. The subtle plane of consciousness, which is the second level, actually creates the universe. The self is creating the universe. The cosmos is creating the physical world. The transcendent creates the cosmos, and the cosmos is creating the individual forms in the universe. That is why they call it the Hiranyagarbha. The Hiranyagarbha, the golden womb from which the physical world comes out. So the gross world is a result of the subtle world, which is the mother of the universe. It's a golden womb. And beyond the two is the transcendent. So Sridhar is explaining that. Okay. So there is a cosmic.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Can we say that the subtle world is like a blueprint, and then that blueprint gets manifested in the physical world?
You can say that, yes. All these images are valid. You can say that, yes. But there is even subtler blueprint which is in the transcendent. Okay. Yeah. Or let me put it this way. Okay, it's an interesting idea what you have said. Okay. At the highest level, the ascetic has an idea in his head. Okay, that's the blueprint in the supramental. Now that architect, he puts it down on paper and makes a drawing. Okay, now that is the second level, which is the self, which is the cosmos. And the third one is the building itself comes up. Okay, it gets subtler and subtler as you go up, and it gets more and more concrete as it comes down.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I included, your image is quite correct, Jasmine. but we can have 3 levels and not only 2. Okay. Like it's also like the poet. He has got an idea, a poem in his head, but when he puts it down on paper, it is there. But later on, even that one piece of paper which he has written in his home, he publishes it in a book. So see, now others also have access to that poem. Okay, it's like that. There's a gradation always. This idea of gradation is very important. Okay, so we go on reading without text. Okay, so I got 5 minutes. So he's saying third level. He's talking of the third level. Okay, individual something which is in which both are united. That's a third level. As our individualization in the world is a becoming of that self. That's what we were discussing just now. The individualization in the world is a becoming of that self. Okay. So is the world too a becoming of that self. Okay. The third is creating the second, and the second is creating the first. The world being includes always the individual being. Therefore, these two becomings, the cosmic and the individual, the cosmic is level 2, individual is cosmic, level 1, are always related to each other in their practical relation, mutually dependent. Okay? The universe depends on me and I depend on the universe. Okay, this is also an idea which he constantly goes on repeating. Okay, I can't exist without the universe. I get my food from the universe, I get my oxygen for breathing from the universe, and I get everything in the universe I need. I need my doctor, I need my tailor, I need my teacher, I need my servant. They are all in the universe. But the universe also depends on the individual. If the forms are not there, where is the cosmos? There is no cosmos without the forms. So it's a mutually dependent, he is explaining. Okay? Level 1 and level 2 are mutually dependent. But we find that the individual being also comes in the end to include the world in his consciousness. And since this is not by an abolition of the spiritual individual, but by his becoming, by his coming to his full, large and perfect self-consciousness, we must suppose that the individual always included the cosmos. Now he is saying, you have to say, how can the individual have a cosmic consciousness unless he is one with the cosmic consciousness? You have to have that. So you must have. The individual is the cosmos in a reduced form. That's what he's saying. But we find that the individual being also comes in then to include the world in his consciousness. And since this is not an abolition of the spiritual individual, but by his coming to his full, large and perfect self-consciousness, we must suppose that the individual always included the cosmos. And it is only the surface consciousness, level 1, surface consciousness, which by ignorance failed to possess that inclusion because of its self-limitation and ego. When you are in level 1, you don't realize that you can be cosmic. But when we speak of the mutual inclusion of the cosmic and the individual, the world in me, I in the world, all in me, I in all. So these are all the 3 possibilities. The world is in me, comprehensive consciousness. The world is inside me. Okay? I in the world, the apprehensive consciousness. You see yourself in everybody. All in me, I in all. He is repeating. All in me, I in all. Okay? It's a different way of saying. Okay? In one case, he's using the word world, and when he's using the word all, he means the same thing. Okay? All in me, I in all. For that is a liberated self-experience. We are evidently traveling beyond the language of the normal reason. It can't have black and white both together. It's not possible. But in the spiritual planes of consciousness, it is possible. That's what he's saying. You have gone beyond the mental and language, beyond the mind and beyond language. That is because the words we have to use are minted by mind and given their values by an intellect bound to the conceptions of physical space and circumstance, and using for the language of a higher psychological experience figures drawn from the physical life and experience of the senses. Okay. Now this is very interesting. He is actually, I got 1 minute, but I just point out to you and you can think about it. He is using another image here. Minted and values. Okay. Now this is very interesting. I just give you a hint before we close. Okay. I have a coin. Okay. A 1 rupee coin. But it is possible for me to consider it only as a valueless metal. And yet it has a value. Okay. So this is minted. The mind is using words which are valueless. Okay. But they have a hidden value. Okay. You have to go beyond the mint. Take a 5 rupee note. Okay. I can consider only paper. It's possible. But there is a value to it. When I go to the second level, I see the value. Okay. So minted and value. So it is giving a very interesting. So when you are in the level 1, you are using words which are only the coins, but they represent something higher. Like a photograph represents something which is real behind the photograph. That's what is pointing out. Okay. That is because the words we have to use were minted by mind. So they are always using images, okay, and become very useful to understand the image. Then your understanding of everything increases. And minted by mind and given their values by an intellect bound to the conception of physical space and circumstance, and using for the language of a higher psychological experience figures drawn from the physical life and experience of the senses. The experience of senses will open you only to the physical world, so you have to somehow use words to understand the higher, but that's why there is a possibility of misunderstanding. But the plane of consciousness to which the liberated human being arises is not dependent upon the physical world, and the cosmos, which we thus include and are included in, is not the physical cosmos, but the harmonically manifest being of God in certain great rhythms of his conscious force and self-delight. So, I think we have finished our time. Okay, there are 3 minutes more, so I'll finish the paragraph. Therefore, this mutual inclusion is spiritual and psychological and not physical. That's what I mean. Okay, it's very possible for 2 glasses of water to mix, but it's not possible for the 2 stones to mix. Okay, that's why the problem comes in our mind. Okay, the cosmic consciousness and the individual consciousness they can mix. Okay, so it is possible, but in a mind it's very difficult to get the 2 together. Either it is this or that. It's a translation of the 2 forms of the many, all and individual. Okay. The language is a translation of the 2 forms of the many, multiplicity, all the cosmos and the individual. Okay, into a unifying spiritual experience, a translation of the eternal unity of the one and the many. For the one is the eternal unity of the many, differentiating and undifferentiating itself in the cosmos. Okay. I think we'll read this a little next time, because he's saying differentiating and undifferentiating. Differentiating when it is coming down. The one differentiates itself into the many. But when you are going up from the lower level, you are again undifferentiating itself into the cosmos. Okay, you are getting rid of the multiplicity and going into the unity. This means that cosmos and individual are manifestations of a transcendent self, the 3rd level, who is indivisible being, although he seems to be divided and distributed. There is a reference to the Gita. Avibhaktam vibhaktam iva tishtati. He is undivisible, but seems to be divided. Okay? but he is not really divided or distributed by indivisibly present everywhere. The divine can be seen whole everywhere. Therefore, all is in each, and each is in all is in God, and all and God in all. All the three levels, transcendent, cosmic, and individual, each one is involved in the other. And when the liberated soul comes into union with this transcendent, it has the self-experience of itself and cosmos, which is translated psychologically into a mutual inclusion and a persistent existence of both in a divine union, which is at once a oneness, a fusion, and an embrace. Now, three words: a oneness, only the divine, and a fusion, the individual is fused with the divine. Okay? So, oneness, transcendent. Fusion, both are there, individual as well as the divine, okay, the infinite, and an embrace. In other words, both are there, but they are fully compatible with each other. So, very subtle differences are there: oneness, fusion, and embrace. Okay. So, think about it and see what is meant by oneness, fusion, and embrace. There is a difference between fusion and embrace. Fusion, you become the divine. Identification. But an embrace is you are embracing the divine. You have a relation with the divine. The individuality is there, and yet you are embracing the divine. Therefore, you are also impersonal. You are also infinite. Finite and infinite are compatible with each other. We come back to those famous sentences of William Blake. No? The finite and the infinite are involved in each other. Okay, we stop here today. Next time, the normal experience.
Merci beaucoup.